Hey, friend.
How are you?
We're doing really good, actually. Well, so short story. We're going to talk about this later in our catch up, but we just got back from Florida really, really early in the morning, Monday morning, and found out when we woke up again on Monday, something had gotten some of our chickens. So I'm slightly distracted because last night I put out some traps and things to try to catch whatever got into our chickens. But I haven't been out to check yet this morning. And so I'm hoping that when we're done with this call, we're going to find some varmints outside that we can get rid of
Yeah,
because, of course, it had to get chickens. That means something to my children.
of course. But I feel like all of the chickens really mean something to your children. These are just the special specials.
I mean, they would be upset if any of them died, but not like this. This is like something killed a pet. But in better news, we're talking about vets and animals in our podcast today, too.
Yeah.
So I wore my shirt for you guys. My bookmarks are for quitters because in my snarky little mind, that's what I think about for myself is like, you can finish this. Don't be a quitter.
I
Finish your
like
book.
it.
But I'm so excited to have you all come along with me and read one of my favorite books. I was introduced to the world of James Herriot as a child through the huge book, it looks huge anyway, of James Herriot's Treasury for Children. In it, I was delighted by stories of Bonnie, the huge Clydesdale who won a pet show at the county fair, a stray mama cat trusting her human friend with her baby, and a dog who only wolfed once. If you don't know about this book for kids, please find it at your library. It is really just lovely. We actually got the audio version of it and listened to it on our trip last week with the kids, and it was really fun. Um, All Creatures Great and Small is set in 1930s Britain in a very tough and rural part of the country. During this time, agriculture in Britain was in a major recession, and it was importing something like 55 to 60% of its food instead of growing it. Large animal vets were having a really hard time finding work, especially if they were fresh out of school. They had no way of knowing that they would be in really high demand once World War II hit in less than a decade, when farmers would be called upon to double food production in less than a year, because now they couldn't import anything because Germany was blocking all of their ports. Many of them knew that they were on the cusp of great change in science and in their veterinary practices, but they were still in this weird in between world of old methods and medicine and new discoveries. It's a fascinating slice of human history and also a way of life that has disappeared. Excuse me, guys, my voice. With the advent of universal communication and homogenization, each dell, town, and family had their own traditions and customs, and it's so fun to hear about them from Harriet's perspective, at least in my opinion. I love hearing about like this little bird has its own traditions and own things and own quirks. Even though medicine is very different from the 30s, so much of it is still recognizable from my childhood. The working of animals, the farmers working alongside the vets, and having the vet stay for whatever mealtime it is. This book is arranged in a series of short stories that fit together to make a whole instead of one long narrative like so many novels are. I liked this arrangement because my reading or listening time is often interrupted. In spite of my t-shirt, I actually have to use bookmarks and I actually have to pause my books a lot. Um, so it felt like I was able to get like a complete bite or a complete idea of the story in just a sitting or a chapter or two. It was also fun listening to this for me for the second time around and knowing what was coming in some of the short stories that made it more satisfying for me. It also made it where like I didn't have to worry so much in some of the more stressful stories. One of my very favorite stories out of this arrangement was the story of old John Skipton and his retired draft horse. Um, Amanda, what did you think about this way of telling one long story in shorter bites? And was there one in particular of those shorter stories that stuck out to you?
Um, I had a much harder time following along, but I also tend to listen in very long stretches.
Mm.
So while I'm driving for an hour and a half one way and an hour and a half back, so I was like, I feel no cohesiveness here at all.
Oops.
But like, I still enjoyed the stories, especially more towards the end. Um, I really liked the personal stories the best.
Hmm.
But there was a story about one of the animals where I don't remember what he was calling it, but the cow had got an infection in its milk duct.
Hmm.
And this poor farmer milked this cow for 24 hours straight.
Yeah.
And he gets back to just check on him, and like the guy's laying over on the cow. He's barely awake. And then when he's like, "Oh, hey, I've never seen anything like this. This cow is better." The farmer was like, "Okay." And he's like, "Man, you need to go to bed and get some food, get some sleep." And he goes like, "I will, but first the chores." It's like,
Yep.
oh, this poor fella.
I like how his wife was like, "You've never seen anything like it because you've never seen a farmer who was fool enough to stay up all night and do that."
Yes.
She was very aggravated, I think, at him, but impressed at the same time.
Yeah,
But yeah. Um, One of the things that you see consistently throughout the book that I really enjoy is anthropomorphism of the animals. So acting like they have human emotions or human thoughts or feelings.
they do.
And the animals, uh,
They do.
they do, of course they
They
do.
have human thoughts and feelings.
We have a lot of opinions
Mhm.
around our house because all of the animals have opinions, and the children are always here to interpret the opinions and tell us all about them. I really enjoy when Harriet translates what he thinks they're saying or interprets the looks they give him as he would human expressions. I know different people have different opinions on how much animals understand and communicate with us, but Harriet clearly thought that animals had ideas and feelings to communicate. There were, however, people in the book who took it even further, such as Mrs. Pumphrey and her precious Tricky Woo. I love their interaction with each other and with Uncle Harriet. Nowadays, pet parents and fur babies might not seem so odd, but during this era that it was written, I think it was really quirky at best, the way that Mrs. Pumphrey interacts with Tricky Woo. I love how Jim managed to kind of like hack this relationship to everybody's benefit. Um, Amanda, what did you think about the relationship of Mrs. Pumphrey and Tricky Woo and Harriet, and what was one of your favorite parts about their interaction?
Um, so especially like the feeding of the dog,
Uh-huh.
100% my mom. And we had this dog, her name was Princess Anne,
Hmm.
and we loved that dog. I got her the day before I moved into college, and we had her for about 13 years. And she passed last summer, last July. And Princess would often tell my mom what she wanted to eat.
Uh-huh.
And at Thanksgiving, Princess got her own plate. And I remember there was one Thanksgiving, they had put her some mashed potatoes on her plate and a little bit of the meat and something else. And Princess eats everything except for the mashed potatoes. And she had taken like one lick of the mashed potatoes and stopped. And everybody's like, how funny is that? That like she didn't eat that. That's so funny. And Dad's like, did anybody put salt on those mashed potatoes? And everybody's like, no. we did not put salt on the dog's mashed potatoes. And he takes the salt shaker and he reaches down and he like shakes a little bit of salt in it. And he says, "Okay, I got it for you." And the dog comes over and finishes the plate. And so,
But she
like,
does.
almost every story about that interaction reminded me of Princess Anne. And
I
she
like it.
also, like, dogs aren't supposed to have chocolate. We have discovered that it's dark chocolate or baker's chocolate that dogs can't have.
Okay.
And we can prove this because Princess's favorite food was a Reese cup.
Oh my goodness.
And growing up, I didn't have a bedroom door. Like through my or I had a door. I didn't have a doorknob through my teenage years. It had just messed up, and nobody ever took the time to fix it. And I can remember one night I was in college, and the way I would work is I worked full time and was doing school online. So on Friday nights, I would come home and I would take a nap as soon as I got home from work. And then I would have snacks and stuff laid out in the kitchen already so I wouldn't have to wake anybody up. I could just like sneak in, grab the stuff, and walk out. I would wake up at like 8, 9 o'clock at night and stay up all night long, re listening to lectures, doing homework, taking tests, because that was when it was the quietest. And one night I got a Reese cup for my snack, and I'm in my room, like I have it hid as I walk to my room. I get in there and I get under the covers and I even pull a pillow over so nobody hears it. And I slowly like open the wrapper up. And when I
Uh-huh.
pulled the covers back down to like start eating, Princess Anna's standing there with her head cocked, like, "Hi, you gonna share that?"
I know you meant to give me that. That's what you were going to do. That was your total intention. I think one of my favorites is when they bring Tricky Woo to their office because he's so obese. Like he can't hardly breathe. He's so overweight and he can't move. And they just treat him like a normal dog instead of like the prince. And he loves it and he has such a good time. But Mrs. Pumphrey's so worried that she's sending all of these super fancy, like delicatessen type foods and drinks, and the people are the ones eating it. And they're like, oh, this is great. We're just gonna have a drink over here in honor of Tricky. It's gonna be awesome. So I love that part where Tricky doesn't even get his treats that she sends him that everybody else really enjoys it and has a good time. So forgive me, I'm gonna read a little stretch to you guys. In chapter 43, we have a really poignant scene with an invalid woman named Miss Stubbs and her pets. She has just lost one of her dogs, and she knows that her time will be soon to go too. They have this conversation. It's kind of long, but I wanted to read it to you guys because I love it. Um, she says, "It's my dogs and cats, Mr. Harriet. I'm afraid I might never see them when I'm gone, and it worries me so. You see, I know I'll be reunited with my parents and my brothers, but, but, well, why not with your animals? That's just it." She rocked her head on the pillows, and for the first time I saw tears on her cheeks. "They say animals have no souls." "Who says?" "Oh, I've read it, and I know a lot of religious people believe it." "Well, I don't believe it." I patted the hand which still grasped mine. "If having a soul means being able to feel love and loyalty and gratitude, then animals are better off than a lot of humans. You've nothing to worry about there." "Oh, I hope you're right. Sometimes I lie at night thinking about it." "I know I'm right, Miss Stubbs, and you don't argue with me. They teach us vets all about animals' souls." The tension left her face, and she laughed with a return of her old spirit. "I'm sorry to bore you with this, and I'm not going to talk about it again. But before you go, I want you to be absolutely honest with me. I don't want reassurance from you, just the truth. I know you are very young, But please tell me, what are your beliefs? Will my animals go with me? She stared intently into my eyes. I shifted on in my chair and swallowed once or twice. Miss Stubbs, I'm afraid I'm a bit foggy about all this, I said, but I'm absolutely certain of one thing. Wherever you are going, they are going too. She still stared at me, but her face was calm again. Thank you, Mr. Harriet. I know you're being honest with me. That is what you really believe, isn't it? I do believe it, I said. With all my heart, I believe it. So, Amanda, I know what I believe,
Hmm.
and I'm happy to share it. But I hope you don't mind me putting you on the spot. Do you agree with Mr. Harriet?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I feel like there are particular animals that God made, and I'm like, why would He have put so much intention and thought into their character and into their life and how they take care of people without them getting to also be in heaven too? Like,
Yeah,
there's definitely animals I'm full on expecting to be there when I get there.
yeah, absolutely. All dogs go to heaven. Some cats.
I don't think all cats want to go to heaven.
Some cats want to go back to their creator, Satan.
You sound like your husband talking.
We all know. We have all met
Okay,
that
time out.
cat.
There's a fox outside. Oh, drama.
Yeah.
We have drama. I just saw it running and it was chasing one of the other chickens. Thankfully, it wasn't a pet, but it was chasing one of the black and white chickens. I think it was one of the Wyandottes. And we never see foxes by the house. This is ridiculous. This is like over the top crazy because we never see them by the house.
Yeah.
So we have a blooper. Diana running after a fox in the middle of a talk. So, starting back up,
Mhm.
I connected so much with Harriet in one particular part. I can't really remember which chapter it was, but he's been called out to a really hard calving at like 4 in the morning after having just gotten in bed from another call earlier in the night. He is thoroughly disgusted and lamenting ever becoming a vet. Once the job is successful, once the job is successfully finished, though, and the calf is born, he is reminded how much he loves what he does. I related to this so much as a mom. You just cleaned up one mess only to walk out of the room and walk back into a tornado, or when babies were especially small in the middle of the night feedings, and then there's a blowout diaper right after the baby gets to sleep, and now you have to change it and wake the baby up all over again. Um, or if we had a lot of belly aches when one of my kids was very little, and you're stuck in this fugue of will this ever end? But then all of a sudden something happens and you experience this huge sweet joy all over again of, oh yeah, that's why we do this. And that was amazing. And of course, this is what I want to do with my life. Um, so I really connected with that because there's multiple moments where Harriet is just like, why? Why did I even ever choose to do this? Why am I a large animal vet? Like, this is the dumbest thing I ever could have done. But he almost immediately gets it turned back around when something good happens. So, Amanda, was there a particular character that you connected with and why? I remember
Um,
you talking about Siegfried, I think.
yes. I I think at times I connected with James or Jim. Not
Uh-huh.
James. James. Jim.
They call him both. Yeah. Jim is his
Same
nickname. His
person.
name's James Herriot. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Um, when he has to deal with Siegfried.
I know. I know.
Oh, like we all have that person
Hmm.
who's like, you need to just grow up and get married. Like, what are you waiting for? Here's my case. You know that I'm right.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, you were in a really big rush and I'm worried about you. Like, why are you in this big of a rush to get married? You don't even have anything settled yet. It's like, oh, yeah, I've lived there.
Yeah. Sometimes I felt like I connected with Siegfried for that though, because like when you get really fired up and convicted about something, and this is gonna change. I'm gonna do better, and you're gonna do better with me. And then the fire burns out
Yeah.
like a few weeks later. And you're like, I never said that. Why would I say that? That's ridiculous. Who believes that? So yeah, I connected with those two parts. Um, a big player in this story is the landscape itself. The author goes to great lengths to describe the fierce, wild beauty of the dells. It's one of the things that Jim really falls in love with, and he finds a lot of peace and solace in his stolen moments stopped alongside the road to soak in the view and breathe the air. Amanda, do you think Jim would have been as happy as a vet if he had followed his expected course and become a small animal vet in a city somewhere?
I don't think so. I think he enjoyed that so much.
Hmm.
I don't think he would have been as happy anywhere. It's like he may have been somewhat satisfied, but
Hmm.
as far as being truly happy, I think he needed that interaction with the larger animals, with the farmers, having the opportunity to drive down the country roads for better or for worse.
Hmm.
Like, you may have this beautiful landscape, you may go over the hill, you may get hit by a car, you never know what's going to happen.
I did get hit by a car once.
And he went over the hill once and
Yep.
straight through a clubhouse.
Yep. Yep. Sounds like something my brothers would do. Um, so you already answered the second part, which was when it was the time that the wild country setting affected the story. Um, in the children's book, I I don't think he talks about it in this one, but in the children's book, he's on his way to a call, and it's winter, and there's this frozen pond, and he just out of the corner of his eye catches this little movement, and he goes and finds this kitten and takes it into the farmers. And that also to me, like the baby animals in the house, the way they take care of the animals, that's still something very common with at least my family and the way we farm now. Um, but like those moments really impact his career, like the countryside and the actual landscape itself, because that's not something that would have happened if he'd been like in the city or things like that. Um, so yeah, uh, I have so many things I want to talk about. I don't know how we are on time. Um,
You're good. We're
but
like still 30, we're only 30 minutes into this recording so far.
oh, okay, good. I was freaking out. I was like,
No.
I'm worried we're gonna have too much time. Um, there were some quirks that of the farmers in the area and the Dells people that Harriet talks about that remind me strongly of my family in the South and throughout Appalachia. I didn't know if that triggered for you too, such as their disregard for time, like just like time is very relative. Um, yeah, they said this time, but we're going to make our way there as we see fit or ignore the time schedule completely. Very thrifty. All of the farmers are very thrifty. Their work ethic, their pride, their hardiness, and their generosity with each other, with taking care of each other. Um, the families who would send him home with sausages, butter, or scones when he knew they were already stretched tight. Those tugged at my heart and reminded me of so many wonderful country folk and farmers that I have known and still know. Amanda, did you see any crossovers like that between this book and our world now?
Um, I think you pretty much covered everything with like, if you have a guest, they need to leave with food.
Yes.
Um, the very like most of the people that I know, especially the older Appalachian like farmers or just people, they are very much like, no, this is what time you're telling me you're being here. You better be here at this time. However, we still do this today. I'm really bad for this. And my mom called me on it just like a couple weeks ago. I was telling a story and I was like, "Well, you remember the other day when they said this?" And she was like, "The other day? Was it the other day?" And I was like, "Yeah." She said, "Amanda, that was 2 years ago."
Yeah,
And I was like, "Well, it was still not today, so it was the other day."
it was another day. There was another day that this happened. Um, I think the one that really got me was when they asked the family asked for a ride to go hear like an like a orchestra or a concert or something like that. And he is anxious out of his mind to get there. And they're just like taking their time, having another course of food and another course of food. And then everybody's got to get dressed. And then they decide, well, this lazy brother really should go with us. Like they were going to make it on time, but this lazy brother, he's got to get up and clean himself and come with us. And makes Harriet late. And then they like kind of look at him sideways when he gets to the church when he's late, like everybody else does. And he's like, this is just how this is my payback for this. But yeah, very much the if you tell me you're going to be here on time, you need to be here. But saying goodbye can be very brief or it can take hours.
Mhm.
Like depends on the family.
Yeah.
Um, there's also, I think, a lot of like clannishness kind of displayed in the books with the smaller families and the very rural families like that they don't really have connection with anybody else, so they have their own like little capsule of world and personality. Um, so another one that I wanted to touch on was a continual conversation in this book is the question of can large scale farmers really care about the individual animals that they have? I personally think like this is very dependent on the farmer, on who they are. But I definitely think large scale farmers can care about the individual animals on their in their care. My mom and dad almost always have around 200 head of cattle on the farm. They're not milking that many at a time, but there's almost always between the new babies, the yearlings, the dry cows, the cows that they're actually milking, the bulls. There's almost always 200 head of cattle. And they've had that many animals forever, for a very long time, ever since they started milking again. So at least 20-ish years, I think now. So during that time, my mom has named every single heifer calf born on this farm. Not only has she named them, but never does a name repeat. Like she's never repeated any names, except for there's two cow lines where once the matriarch has died, she's renamed one of the granddaughters after the matriarch because they like that cow line so much.
Oh.
So we currently, I don't know if she's still in the herd, but for a long time we had Moo. And then when Moo died, one of her granddaughters was named Moo too. And that was just a really popular cow line. And like she'll use parts of the names for a cow line, but she won't reuse the names again. And they're all individuals to my parents and to my family. Like you call them out by name, you call to them by name. If they're acting up in the parlor, you know exactly which one is acting up. Um, and they're my mom's hobby as well. Like they're not just her job, they're her hobby. She enjoys them so much. So, Amanda, you have experience with farmers of different sizes. Do you think that farmers can care for their individual animals as much as someone who only has like 5 or 6 animals?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because it's almost like a necessity. They need to care deeply for each animal in order to provide care, proper
Mm-hmm.
care to that animal.
Hmm.
Otherwise, they're just going to forget it. They're going to forget to feed it. They're
Hmm.
going to forget to take care of it. They're not going to care about making sure that it's healthy.
Hmm.
Um, you just, if you have this inanimate object that doesn't really matter to you, you're not going to think too much about it. So I think in order, like, for them to provide the care that they do, and for them to, I don't know a single farmer who doesn't at least mourn a little bit when one dies,
Oh yeah,
even though, like, it's a farm, you know this is going to happen. You're going to lose a lot of animals.
exactly. There's a saying that my dad says often is if you have livestock, you're going to have dead stock.
Hmm.
And it's just inevitable, like especially when you have a large number of animals, that you're going to lose some every now and then.
Yeah. But I feel like they mourn a little.
Oh yeah.
Maybe not. They may grieve more over certain animals than others,
Hmm.
but you're gonna
Like
have
me.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. The book demonstrates this multiple times, but the one that comes to mind the most for me is what I mentioned at the beginning, the story of John Skipton and Bonnie, and what's the other horse's name? I only remember Bonnie. I can't remember the other one. Dolly. Bonnie and Dolly. And John Skipton is one of the biggest farmers in the area, possibly the biggest farmer in the area. He owns so many acres and so many animals, but he cares for these two old retired horses that have been literally retired for 12 years in his pasture. And he goes down every day to visit them and check on them. And he's one of the examples that they give of farmers who are on a large scale, but still care very much for individual animals. Um, and Bonnie's story is one of my favorites in the Harriet Treasury, the children's treasury, because I think they talk about it in later books that Harriet publishes. But John Skipton ends up taking her to the fair and enters her in the family pets competition. And it's adorable and fantastic, and I highly recommend it. So, those actually were my questions because I
Mhm.
was afraid I was going to go really long. Um, I guess one of the ones that I don't have specific examples of this, but what did you think about the humor in the book, Amanda? It was very British and understated. And
I I liked it. I liked most of it at least. Like the
hmm.
humor with Siegfried and Tristan was hilarious.
Hmm.
Um, poor James's dating luck.
That was not good. That was not good. Poor James
Um,
also like getting hammered. Dude, have some moderation there.
See, I very, very much the animal stories, they were okay. The personal stories I loved. Like I
Hmm.
loved the interactions with Siegfried. I loved how mad Siegfried would get at Tristan. I loved the predicaments that Tristan found himself in.
I love
Um
Tristan.
yeah.
I love Tristan. He's such a mess.
The the dating stories were my favorite where it's like you try to take this girl out and everything suddenly changes. Like the schedule that they've kept for years suddenly changes that night.
Hmm.
And this is after you've fallen in a mud hole and you've had to change
Yep.
a tire and then you try again, like, or you decide not to try again. You
Hmm.
decide to date someone else and you get completely wasted.
Hmm.
But you're having the time of your life until someone breaks a foot.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then while you're trying to fix that issue, this girl that you just took out on a date that's the one you really like sees you on this date But it also kind of appears that she's on a date.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, that's just awkward. But
Hmm.
he kind of implied that she was upset that he was on a date, but how could she be upset that he's on a date when she's on a date? They never
Hmm.
discussed that part.
Mm-mm.
Um, and then, bless his heart, like he agrees to go on another date and he almost gets in a fist fight.
Yeah,
And she's finally like, maybe we could just go on a walk.
that's all I want to do anyway. Let's just go take a walk, please. That would work just as well. Yeah, I I like the very self-deprecating humor in the book. I like the one where he's wanting to ask Helen's dad to get married, and he was trying to get rid of the smell that was on him before this happened. Like he'd gone to a cow cleansing and it was gross and he smelled awful. And so he had used Mrs. Hall's bath
The
salts.
bath salts, yeah. It smelled very
And
feminine.
oh yeah, very flowery, very lovely. But then he had to take his shirt off and work in the barn. And so all of the people were too polite to say anything, but you could just feel the eyes and the snickers that were happening over his smell. Um, but he was able to recover it and talk to her dad eventually anyway because he got to save Strawberry. So that was a
Yeah.
good deal. Um, I enjoyed the humor. I like the understated humor about it and just like how subtle it was. So anyway, thank you
Oh,
guys. You got
I have,
anything else, Amanda?
yes, I
Go
just
for
thought of another like connection.
it. Uh-huh.
Um, I feel like I don't even remember now. Like I can't remember anyone's names other than Siegfried, James, Tristan, and Helen.
Mm-hmm.
Don't remember anybody else. I think there was
They're the
Brenda.
primary characters.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but he goes over to someone's house. Like he has to go every, few weeks or whatever. He goes over to someone's house and he's like, she's always telling me to get married. This is gonna
Oh
be
yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, when you get married or if you ever decide to get married. And he's like, oh, actually, the next time I come, I'll bring my wife. And she's like, what?
No.
How? And I feel like in some ways that was very similar to us learning about each other
Yeah.
because
Very much.
I've been with you enough now to know, even though like we are very happy sister wives in this group,
Uh-huh.
we could use a third.
Oh,
We could use a
definitely.
third girl.
Hmm.
And like we often look at a couple of the guys like, are you dating anyone? Is there
You
anyone
gonna bring
else
somebody
we
in
could,
here?
hey, we're fun. We could have more fun if
Hmm.
there was another girl.
Well, and also we could actually plan things better. Like,
Yes.
I think that would be really helpful.
But like I feel like at some point you've had the conversation with Shane, like, you dating anybody?
Oh yeah.
And then he calls you one or you called him.
Hmm.
And you were like, so I found zombies in the Bible. And
Yeah.
he's like, well, I'm getting engaged tonight.
And I'm like, wait, you're what? No, you're not.
I've told him like I would love to have been a fly on the wall for so many of these revelations of not necessarily that like he's dating someone, but like that he's engaged to someone. Like, what did you guys think when you got the phone call? And I'm also like knowing everyone now, was there a text message to the group after your conversation with Shane? Because
Oh yeah.
I feel like
Oh
that's a
yeah.
group text situation where you're like,
Oh yeah.
Shane's getting married today
Hey
or
guys,
getting
did you know?
engaged.
Did you know this is happening?
Because then, like, a couple hours later, we're like, hey, everybody, Amanda's here, and these are the people, and there's a bunch of them. We have news that we're engaged. Chris, can
What
you be
I
at the
want to
wedding?
know is like, I don't see how you had any idea what you were getting involved in with us,
No.
with our group. Like, I don't see that that was possible for you to know that there's this group of crazy people that you just attached yourself to, in addition to the person you intentionally attached yourself to.
Well, look, I know that I've talked about it before. I know that it's been brought up. It was brought up in the very first episode of like, we're talking, and early on in dating, we we for sure talked about Kirk. Like Kirk was discussed because that was Shane's primary roommate.
Yeah.
Like the other ones he shared a bathroom with, but this was his roommate. And then like I'm sure there were stories,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't really discussed. And then the day that we get engaged, he's like, I have to call all of these people. And I'm like still trying to remember names, and I've not even seen pictures of anybody yet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And I'm inviting everyone to be in my wedding, or we are inviting people to be in the wedding. And then we start a group chat. Well, we didn't start a group chat. I was added into a group chat
Mm-hmm.
about everybody meeting on Memorial Day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, like that thing that's about to come up. And uh like there was the common players having this discussion. I see you. Chris was not involved at all.
He's not a texter.
Um, I see Kirk responding. Obviously, like Shane is responding a little, but I'm the primary response
Mm-hmm.
from our parties. I see AJ responding. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, this is everybody. This is the crew. And the day before, here is this Jimmy saying he's making it. And I was like, who's Jimmy?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was the day of, and that may have been switched too. It may have been Jimmy was the last one. And I was like, who is this?
Mm-hmm.
John Roy, I specifically remember responding. And I was like, it was either the day before or the day of. And I was like, what is that John Roy?
What is the genre?
And Shane is like, I've mentioned them. And I was like, have you? Have
No.
you mentioned them in any significant stories? And he
Mm-mm.
was like, well, they were there.
That doesn't mean you said anything.
And he was like, do you remember this one really gross story? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, that's John Roy. And then I
Bless
get
him.
there. And like, for sure, the whole group was like siblings.
Mhm.
And I'm just like, okay, hi. Yeah, I am. I'm just gonna add myself in here.
And you did. And it's been great. We need to have
Um,
everybody over again.
yes. I do feel like some days I was there with you. I went to college with you guys. I may have been in high school at the time everybody was in college. But yeah, anyway, like very sidetracked. But that just made me think about like the reaction that a
Mm-hmm.
couple of people had to
Mm-hmm.
his very quick wedding when nobody
Mm-hmm.
even knew he was courting someone seemed very similar to the reactions that we get or got when we show up 3 months later and like, hey, we're engaged. And everybody's like, you were dating someone?
I know that's how I felt. I was like, wait, what? Okay, why haven't I met her? This is a big deal.
And now I feel like I very much have changed this group dynamic. at least for
Mhm.
us.
Mhm.
Because can you imagine Shane eating breakfast and you not knowing all about it?
No,
I feel like we text each other about so much at this point that you could probably tell me what he wore to work yesterday.
probably. Yeah. I can tell you even more about E though.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So now, like,
Yeah.
could you imagine, even if I was not, like, if something terrible happened and we got a divorce, could you imagine him dating someone and you not knowing it?
No, I'd kill him.
Because, like, if I don't tell you about it, I think you're gonna now, to be nosy enough to be like, hey,
Oh, yeah.
what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you
Hey,
doing?
so you need to tell me what's happening now. You gotta keep me informed here. But yeah, I agree. I liked that part too, where she's like, "No, you're not. You're not going to bring your wife here the day after you get married. What are you talking about? That's not a honeymoon. You're pulling my leg." And then she shows up in her fantastic purple pants, and she's
Mhm.
there to help. I also
Yeah.
like that Helen wore pants. I thought that was
Hmm.
kind of cool and very appropriate for her best wife.
Yes. I liked that she's just like, yeah, I'll step right up and do all this and I'll be your assistant.
Yeah, very farmer's daughter of her. Like she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do these things. I'm not afraid of this."
Yeah.
It's just it was very fun. Um, so we got just a couple minutes, and one of the things that I didn't like script this out for myself, but I loved seeing the contrast and the things right alongside of each other of the old way of doing veterinary practice alongside this up and coming new information and some of the things that we still do. And, like this is the early days of vaccines, like super early days of vaccines. This is trying to figure out and defeat TB. Like we don't even think about TB as far as animals go in the US anymore. Like we don't hardly
Mhm.
do TB testing anymore because it's so rare now. Um, but during this era, we were very much trying to stamp it out in order to protect people. Um, I think one of the things that was interesting that he documented because it's so rare to see it happen anymore was when he did the bloodletting for that pony.
Mhm.
Um, like I know that used to happen and it used to be a very common practice, but it was wild to be right there on that cusp of this thing that we used to do all the time. And even at that point, it was not a common practice. And still to resort to that because we didn't have the anti inflammatory drugs that we have now that would have helped that pony. And so they're trying to figure out something that would help and resorting back to those really old ways of doing things. Um, it was wild to me. And Jim, he talks a lot about now in veterinary practice, he's like, what I wouldn't give to have had antibiotics to use on this cow
Yeah.
because all the things that we're using are basically useless for some of these ailments. Like the guy who milked that cow out for 24 hours, had they had antibiotics, it would have been fine. It would have been over.
Yeah.
But they
They
didn't.
wouldn't have lost that many cows.
Right. Right. And so I really like that. I think it's really cool that he documented this period of history where don't do that. Those are contagious. Um, I love that they documented this little slice of history where you've got the old and the new right beside each other for a while right there.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to chat about that. I thought it was really neat.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that way with like their lifestyle too, because he had people who had electricity and running water in their house. And then he had Dell's people who didn't have either in their house, or at least they didn't have indoor uh, toilets and showers and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. It's just a really neat little slice of this transition in history that was going on.
And I like because I got to I like moved funny and had a back spasm. Um,
It's not good.
I'm used to it at this point. It's been almost 20 years. Um, because we had like I got to meet my grandfather, great grandfather, and spend some time with him. And then
Hmm.
he was 97 when he passed. And so
Hmm.
he was born in 1904
Hmm.
and lived a lot of life in that time.
Hmm.
He was very superstitious
Hmm.
and he was very conscious of like, this is how you fix things. This is how you fix problems, or these are solutions. And some of the things are like honestly genius. Like knowing which plant does what and what you mix together and you have a cough. Oh, well, let me just go whip together some moonshine real quick. I'll mix in some, I don't even know what they mix in for it, for the
Lemon and
like
honey.
cough syrup.
Hmm.
And like, take a drink. You'll be fine. I can guarantee it. You'll get the cough
Lemon and
out.
honey and whiskey. Put them all together.
And then there was also, and me and my mom were just talking about this week, him and several of my great aunts and uncles still to this day will follow this. Whatever keeps the cold out will keep the heat out. And so they would wear long sleeves, like flannel in July. I can
Uh,
remember seeing my great uncle in like a Carhartt overall in the middle of July working in the garden. And I'm just like, that's not how body heat works. Like, it's a great idea, but you're not actually keeping the cold out. You're
yeah.
keeping your own heat in.
Hmm.
So what keeps the heat in will only keep it worse. But me and my mom were just discussing that this weekend because my grandmother freezes to death. And I was like, everybody in the family froze to death. They wear flannels and Carhartts in July.
They got adapted to some really hot temperatures if you're wearing flannels and Carhartts in July.
Gosh. But yeah,
Oh, all right.
some of the things made me think of things like that. Like,
Mhm.
yes, some of these, well, the way my daddy did it
Right,
were really good ideas. And some of them are like,
right,
oh, yes, but that's because daddy didn't know any better and you should.
right. Well, or because Daddy didn't have any better tools.
Mm-hmm.
That's all he had. And so, yeah, it worked for him, but we have better tools now. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for joining our conversation. If you all enjoyed these books, um, there is a TV series that was created in the 70s based off of Harriet's books. And there's also now a remake of that series that started in 2001. Both are flippin' delightful. Amanda, you would really enjoy. I haven't watched all of the ones that were started in 2001, but you would really enjoy the way that they portray Siegfried's character, Siegfried and Tristan, in the 70s ones. They crack me up all the time. I've made it through, I think, like season 5 of the older series, the one from the 70s, but I've only made it through season 1 of the newest ones because they aren't free. The other ones, if you have Prime, you can get them with your membership on Prime. But the new ones, you've got to pay for those. So there's now 3 seasons of the newest version, like the updated version. And they still are portrayed as happening in the 30s. It's just new actors and really well done, really well filmed. Um, so I've only watched the first one, but I'm saving up my money so I can watch the next 2 and binge them all the way. So I really enjoyed chatting with you guys about this. Thank you for coming along. Thank you, Amanda, for reading a book that's kind of out of your comfort zone. I really appreciate it.
This is not a book. I've said this several times during these book clubs. This is not a book I would have read on my own. And I text Diana. We're going to take things real dark real quick here. I text Diana one night and was like, I don't know why I'm having such a hard time getting through this. Like, emotionally, this is a harder book for me than the book Woman of Troublesome Creek because I can read
Hmm.
about human deaths all day long. It doesn't affect me. I can
Yeah.
hear about this tragic, tragic death of a person and be like, oh, well, that was rough anyway. Don't,
Moving on.
don't tell me the dog dies. If the dog dies, I'm done for the day.
Thankfully, there's not too many deaths in this book. Like
Well,
overall, for how many animals he goes through, there's not too many deaths.
in the book, however, in my
Yeah.
life, the
Yeah.
very next day, I got a text message and a call saying that one of my Great Pyrenees was found dead.
Hmm.
And like she was only a year old.
Hmm.
We were still like recovering from that. I go in to visit my family for a weekend, and my dad's like, hey, start getting ready. Maggie's not doing well. And I was like, she's an old dog, but she'll be fine. She's just mourning she's mourning Sadie. And he's like, I'm hoping so, but I need you to, you might want to start getting ready.
Hmm.
And then like a week later, I don't even know that it was a full week.
Hmm.
I got a text message that Maggie, that I'd had for 12 years this week,
Hmm.
had passed. And I was like, oh, and I'm reading this book about a guy that makes sick animals better.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's always hard when you lose an animal.
Yeah.
Like it just is. Um, I'm generally in the same camp. Like me and my mom, when we're watching movies, we're like, we don't care how many of the characters die, but don't you dare kill off a horse.
Mm-hmm.
I will come at you if you kill off one of the horses. Like, it's why neither of us will watch the old John Wayne movie. Oh, dang it. What's it called? Um, True Grit. Hate that movie with a passion. Hate it, hate it, hate it.
Yeah.
I don't let the rattlesnake girl get bit and die. I don't care about her. Don't kill off the horse. So,
Um, but
yeah.
I guess really quickly, since we're discussing like emotional turmoil, about the next book.
Yeah.
Have you started?
No.
Okay. It's only like a little over 3 hours long,
Yeah, it's not a big book. I still,
but
like, I'm
it's,
bracing myself.
yes. Um, I have listened to it 3 separate occasions, and I either have to pause it to like, I need to sing a song, I need to do something else, because otherwise I'm going to be driving down the interstate like bawling. I'm going to be sobbing, not just a couple of
Hmm.
tears, sobbing. And then there's like sometimes where I'm like, that's really good information. I need to write this down. And I'll have to stop and like voice dictate, like, she said to do this, and she said to do this, and she said to do this, and this is the order of this. And so it's taken me a minute to get through these 3 hours. But our next book, we've talked about it a little bit, is Casey Davis's How to Keep House While Drowning.
Hmm.
And it is a cleaning how-to book that will completely wreck your world. I
Because
found
that's
out
how we
about
roll.
it. Yeah. There was a TED Talk that I saw that's how I figured out, like, I'd seen the book, but I thought it was stupid. And
Hmm.
then I watched a clip of her TED Talk that was like, I've had so many women text me telling me that my book saved their life. which is weird considering I wrote a cleaning how-to. Um, but yeah, like it's only 3 hours long if you're listening to the audiobook, so it's very small. And she gives like an abridged version where she's like, if you are not okay right now, skip on to chapter 7.
Hmm.
If this doesn't apply to you, go to chapter 11. Like even
Hmm.
in the audiobook. So she makes it very easy for people to digest. She makes it very easy for people to, like, people with neurodivergency to be able to follow because she herself has ADHD. And
Hmm.
she's like, I know what it's like to read a book. This is how we're going to do this. And I'm going to sprinkle in some profanity just to keep your attention.
Just to keep you present. You gotta stay here.
Yeah. But that is our next book, and I'm so excited about it. Like I'm excited to talk about it,
Hmm.
but I've read this book for the first time in December, so I've had 5 months of
Hmm.
processing with my therapist.
Yes. Well, and that's what you told me when you read this book, is we're going to use it for a podcast, but I don't know when we're going to use it for a podcast because I've got to digest it and process it with my therapist first.
Yeah. And then there was something the last time I read it on Sunday on the way, or listened to it on Sunday on the way home. And she said something that I was like, how did I miss that the first time?
Hmm.
And I like start crying all over again. And I have to like stop and write it down. And I think it was something like, you are not a failure because of this. I was like, I'm not a failure because of this.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, but also very nervous about it. I'm sorry, guys. I keep looking out the window because we have a blooper where there was a fox and it was chasing my chickens.
Oh, a
And
couple parts of that is staying in. Like, there's a fox and running.
so I just keep looking out my window. It's right here to my right, and I'm like, no movement. Okay, we're good. So, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
my
Some of
life,
it, like
y'all.
a big portion of it will be taken out, but I got there's a fox.
I'm out.
The part needs to stay in, and then like the look of exasperation when you sat back down in your chair of like, you've seen some stuff.
Oh my gosh, y'all. Like, we don't have foxes, but apparently now we do. So, not cool.
Speaking of
But
farms,
yeah, speaking of animals and dead stock and livestock and all of those things, that's happening into real time right now. But anyway, um, thank you guys. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed this book. I hope you guys liked it too. And thank you, Amanda, for reading it. And I'm excited to read our next book and talk about it in just a few weeks.
yes, very excited.
Well, y'all have a wonderful week. And don't forget to look for the beauty in your unvarnished life. Love y'all. Bye.
Bye.